I'd like to tell you a story. My story. I grew up in Evansville, Indiana. My teenage years were the late 80s and early 90s. And there wasn't a lot to do in that town but get in trouble or go to church. And I went to church a lot. Like that became my whole universe. From a really young age, I knew something was different about me. And I didn't have the words for it, but I knew that I liked boys in a way that I was not supposed to. And I knew that I had to protect that secret at all costs. I remember in school watching what I perceived as like the manliest kids and imitating them, like the way they walked, the way they talked. I remember in the cafeteria, they'd be hunched over their plates, like eating with their mouths open. So I ate like that too, because I didn't want anyone to know whatever it was inside of me that was not the way it was supposed to be. Also remember, this is before the internet. There weren't even a lot of TV channels. So like the only information I had, the only voices I heard were the ones immediately around me. As I got older, I started to understand that I was gay, and in that world, there is very little that could be worse than that. I remember so many sermons in church of different pastors sort of talking about how homosexuality is even possible, and it was these stories of, in the Bible, there were these men who were so perverted and evil that God just abandoned them and gave them over to their evil desires. And I remember as like a 12-year-old, like, oh, what did I do? Like God must have abandoned me and given me over to my evil desires at 12. I was like, did God see me looking at the JCPenney underwear catalog? Is that why this happened? I was a good kid. I could have gotten in trouble. There was lots of trouble to be had in a small town in 1990. But I went to church. I cared about telling the truth. I didn't do bad kid things. It was so absurd that I was like searching within, like, what did I do to deserve this? My high school years were the height of the AIDS epidemic, and all of the messaging I got around sex and sexuality came with a death sentence. And that was a different era, different time. It's not that that was completely unreasonable. I'm just saying that is the world in which my young brain was formed. I hung around Evansville for a couple of years after high school, and finally there was just this instinctive thing inside of me that was like, get the hell out of here. And I went away to college, and that decision probably saved my life. I enrolled in musical theater, and it sounds absurd, but this is like 1994. And I was, for the first time, really around gay people and straight people who didn't care that the gay people were gay and totally fine. No issue. It blew my mind. I didn't even understand that that was a possibility. People ask, like, what was my coming out moment? And there really wasn't one. I stretched it out over years. It was a super long process to let go of all that pain and confusion, but I did over time. Time heals all wounds. I've found that to be true. And here I am today, a glorious middle-aged man, completely fine with myself. But it took a long time to get here. Over the years, I've lived through a lot of eras where my people are the monster of the moment. And here we are again, and I've even seen lately comments and heard from people who consider themselves to be LGBTQ allies, but then also say, but we have to protect the children. And you could only say those two things together if you sort of deep down believe that LGBTQ people are kind of naughty, and it's fine if you're an adult, but let's protect the children. I just told you my whole story, and none of it was about sex. I remember in the early 2000s when George W. Bush was running for president, and that whole campaign was protect the children, family values, wholesome. How could you not want to protect the children? And I remember living through that, seeing through all that. It wasn't about the children. It was about making people afraid. It was about making someone the monster of the moment. Protect the children. I was the children. And there was no one in my sphere of living, that was a weird phrase, that was trying to teach me to be gay. Quite the opposite. And in my experience, we can only turn groups of people into monsters when we don't really know them. And now you know me. And I'm not a monster most of the time.